access to medication. I don't mean free like you don't pay for it,
right,
but able to take medication. Those things, you know, people can do whatever they can do to fight this disease and help one another on a voluntary basis, but not have it be expected upon them to take care of their neighbor, that it's their responsibility to take care of themselves and their own. So I think that's a you know, something that as a party we need to kind of look at and explain a philosophy and a way of being, if you will, that allows people to work together to fight things, but not to have expectations on someone else, on a government that's frankly been had a very small response to a huge problem, and a late response.
Well, let me answer some of those concerns. I think libertarians think that we have a moral responsibility to help each other, but we shouldn't have a legal responsibility to help
Absolutely.
each other. Because that'll firstly, it's going to hinder your efforts to help somebody. That's because the money first must be sent all the way to Washington, D.C. in a leaky hose, all the way to Sacramento, a leaky hose, and all the way back
to the counties in a leaky hose.
Back to the counties, right. So, and then as far as health care goes, now look at the FDA. Now, people died before they could get some of the AIDS drugs through the FDA. Okay, so there's interference there, and there needs to be more of an open market for people who have skills in medicine in order to use them to bring down the costs. Because right now, if I get a cut, okay, I have to go to an emergency room or to a doctor and have it fixed. I'd have it sewn up. Now, there are lots of people that aren't doctors, that aren't MDs, that know how to sew up cuts and do other medical procedures, or could be trained as medical practitioners to do certain surgeries, certain medical procedures, sew up a cut. We'll just use sewing up a cut as an example, but we mean it for a lot of different medical procedures. But I just can't go to someone and pay who knows how to sew up a cut that just sews up cuts, a cut doctor that can determine, can this person, is this cut, is there nerve damage, is there tendon damage, is there damage to a major artery or something like that? Does this person need to go to a doctor, or can I just disinfect it and sew it up? And that doctor would be a specialist, or a medical practitioner would be a specialist in just sewing up cuts, and would be better at it than any doctor I would go and see, who is just going to go tell somebody else to sew it up, look at it, but that increases the cost so much more. If you have people that can have medical skills that can use them, people that can't perform medical procedures but who can diagnose you and prescribe medicine to you. But none of that is allowed.
Well, there's also, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I think there's also a lot of regulation that bears in particular on the AIDS epidemic. And one very obvious one is the prohibition of medical marijuana. You know, libertarians fought very hard to get Prop 215 on the ballot. You know, it's an effective treatment for keeping, you know, the AIDS cocktail or the cocktail down instead of vomiting up your medication. You know. It's effective in treating. It's also effective in treating glaucoma and different types of cancer and just chronic pain, you know, fatigue, and you know that's a form of governments. That's more of an externality. I mean, government has basically said for moral reasons that you know that marijuana is bad, but somehow alcohol is acceptable or good. Well, you know, so that's one very effective treatment for HIV and AIDS that the government just has decided by fiat that that's too important to allow to people. Another thing that's really important is really corporations that have obtained too much protection for intellectual property and medication. Right now, a lot of a patent usually only runs, I think, 20 years on pharmaceuticals, and if a corporation's 20-year patent runs out, they use I was going to say another word, but really pretextual challenges to prolong the term of patent extension, when they basically got their term of the deal out of it. You know, they've taken something, they've got a 20-year monopoly on it. Now it's fair to just let it out into the public and let competitors manufacture generic drugs, and it's actually it's actually good. I think the Bush administration is trying to crack down on that, and they've been the first administration to do so. And they're also allowing reimportation of patented pharmaceuticals from other countries.
Right.
I think both of those are really important and really good developments. And that's an example of, you know, we always think about, is the government doing enough? Is the welfare state doing enough to help people who are put in a poor situation, but we don't, in a bad situation, but we don't think enough about what did the government do to put them there in the first place? And, you know, if you can't have medical marijuana and you can't have inexpensive drugs to treat HIV and AIDS that you would have been able to obtain, and if you're paying 30 to 40% of your income in taxes, you know, those are huge barriers to taking care of yourself and to providing care for people that you care about directly, that you know personally, and in your community, the gay community being one example.
Keeps you from taking care of someone. The moral obligation I was talking about before, you cannot meet that moral obligation. Now you have a legal obligation, but so much of your money is taken up in taxes. How would you answer some of your own questions regarding what you were talking about, the AIDS epidemic and the gay community?
One thing that came to mind when you were speaking about the cut and the doctor and all of that is that an ever-enlarging, growing government has really taken the place of personal judgment, of my deciding for myself or relying on someone else to give me proper counsel, proper advice about a particular thing. So now, instead of my going to someone, and it could be someone in a person's, you know, church or family or business that's been through something similar. They've had the same kind of a cut, you know. You call them up, you know, what do I do? Now, the government is the one that decides these people have taken our tests and we've decided that they're qualified to do this, therefore you must go to them. It happens in architecture, a field that I started out in. You know, the government mandates tests and you pass the test, then you're qualified to be an architect. Now, America's greatest architect, Frank Lloyd Wright, never took an architect's test. Back in the day, he put up a shingle and said, Frank Lloyd Wright, architect. Literally, that's what he did. And he became our greatest architect. He never took any tests, but people trusted his judgment, and some people thought it was great, some people not so great. You know, I'm not advocating him particularly, but that idea, and what happens over time, and I'm talking about generational, not just me, but generational. We teach it to our children. We accept that we can't make those decisions for ourselves, that we must rely on Big Brother to make those decisions for us. They're the ones that can say, this is a proper treatment for AIDS, and this is not. And what happens is two things. One, it takes that right away from you to decide, but it also takes that ability to discern away. And so people become more susceptible to charlatans. There were umpteen AIDS cures out there. People were flocking to Mexico to drink this and to take that and to have the blood boiled and to all of these things. Some of them proved fatal. You know, some of them may have been successful, but we don't know because there weren't enough studies done. They were shut down. So I think it's a short-term problem. I don't mean the AIDS epidemic is short-term, but a particular circumstance. The cut on your hand is short-term, but the government's answer to it is a long-term thing, not just for me, but for, you know, generations to come. And I think that's a major reason why I'm a libertarian. It's because I want to be personally responsible. I want the personal liberty, and I want others to have it today and certainly in the future. And the way the two-party system is it's just, you know, it's like a ping pong game back and forth between two very good players, and they play one another, you know, play against one another, and the audience is sitting there saying, wow, this is a very exciting ping pong game, and you know, they're getting lulled into accepting whatever is told them. This is what you will do, this is how you will do it.
That's a good analogy, because I see that too with like just the gay community. Not being gay, I I still look at that issue, and I see it as the gay community as being kind of this ping pong ball that's being